Well, shalom, dear friends, and welcome to this session of Hebrew School. One of the things that we have been trying to do is talk about some subjects or topics of interest right at the beginning of these reading lessons. And I'd like to do that as we start today. What I would like to talk about today is the language of the Second Temple era. This was the era in which Yeshua, Jesus, lived. The Second Temple era began about 200 years before his ministry began and came to an end in 70 AD, or CE, if you prefer, when the Romans destroyed the temple. It was called the Second Temple era. And so that's the time frame that we're looking at. And the subject I want to bring up is the question about what language the Jewish people living in Israel spoke at the time of Yeshua. Up until about 70, 75 years ago, when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, just about everybody was under the assumption that the standard language, the conversational language of the people of Israel was Aramaic. Aramaic is the language of ancient Babylon. And of course, it extends from the Persian Gulf, following the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, to the north and to the west, up into the region of like modern day Syria. And it was believed by most scholars that after the time of the Babylonian captivity, that's when a large number of Jewish people, Israelis, were taken captive by King Nebuchadnezzar and were kept as prisoners in ancient Babylon for about 70 years. Actually, the time frame was a little bit longer than that. But they came to the conclusion that over that 70 to 100 year period of time, that the Jewish people would have learned how to speak the language of Aramaic, the Babylonian language, to the extent that when they returned to their promised land, they had basically forgotten the Hebrew language, and that they even needed interpreters like when the Bible passages were read in Hebrew, they needed interpreters to translate it for them into the Aramaic language. One of the one of the evidences of this point of view is the Mel Gibson movie that came out a number of years ago called The Passion of the Christ. And it was the story of the crucifixion, the death and resurrection of Yeshua. And it was, Mel Gibson made a real point out of historical accuracy. So he had all of the Roman characters speaking Latin, and there were English subtitles. And all the Jewish people, he had them speaking Aramaic. And there were English subtitles for that too. So he was just reflecting the kind of theological point of view that had been popular, many years, about 100 years ago and earlier, that the common language of Israel was Aramaic. One of the evidences that Bible scholars cited in support of that view of Aramaic being spoken is that throughout Yeshua's ministry, he and other people in their speech would use Aramaic words. Probably one of the most famous ones was when Jesus was on the cross. One of the 7 words or phrases that he uttered from the cross was Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which means in English, my God, why have you forsaken me? The word sabachthani, they say, is Aramaic, and that he was quoting Psalm 22, but he quoted it a little bit differently. In Psalm 22, in Hebrew, it says, Eli, Eli, lama azavtani. So Jesus used a different word, and they assumed that the word that he used was Aramaic. And in fact, the word sabachthani, to be forsaken, it does have Aramaic roots. But the truth of the matter seems to be that certainly during the Babylonian captivity, the Jewish people, the Hebrew speakers, did learn a lot of Aramaic words. Definitely gained fluency in that language. But Hebrew was always the language of their worship. It was the language of the Bible. And so when they returned to the promised land, the land of Israel, they came with a lot of Aramaic words added to the vocabulary of Hebrew. But when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered some 70 years ago, they were almost exclusively written in Hebrew. And of course, the Dead Sea Scrolls originated during the Second Temple era, the era of Yeshua. And so that has given us an indication that the language of Israel in those days was Hebrew, with a few Aramaic words added to the vocabulary that had come with them from the East. Truth be told, when it comes to Jesus' words from the cross, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, sabach the root word sabach does come from Aramaic, but it has a slightly different meaning than the Hebrew word that King David used by inspiration in Psalm 22, azavtani, lama azavtani, why have you forsaken me? Azav in Hebrew and maybe in Aramaic also means to be forsaken permanently. Sabach in Hebrew and Aramaic has a more temporary meaning. Yeshua went to the cross kind of knowing what was to befall him. He knew that he would be abandoned by God, but he also knew, if for no other reason than based on the larger context of Psalm 22, that he would be restored to fellowship. So knowing what he knew, it really would have been inappropriate for him to use the Hebrew word from Psalm 22, azavtani. And so he used a substitute word, an appropriate word that happens to have its roots in Aramaic. And so sabachthani and azavtani are both Hebrew words that were in use at the time of Yeshua. And so that is scant evidence that Yeshua was speaking Aramaic. I have a book that I'm going to see if I can get it on the camera here. It is it's going to be kind of tricky because the camera doesn't like books. This is a book called The Language of Jesus, and it's written by a scholar named Douglas Hamp. Douglas Hamp is got his degree from Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and he majors in biblical languages. And basically in this book, he shared what I have just shared with you, but he goes into, of course, a lot more detail. So if you're interested in this subject about what was the common language in the days of Jesus, I recommend Douglas Hamp's book. H-A-M-P is his last name. And the book is entitled The Language of Yeshua, the subtitle, I'm sorry, The Language of Jesus, and the subtitle is Hebrew or Aramaic. Before we go on to our lesson, and I want to give you kind of a sample from the text that we'll be looking at today of this kind of confusion about what the language of the Second Temple era was. But before we do that, I want to show you a little map here. It's a map of Galilee at the time of Yeshua. And of course, right here in the middle of the picture, you see the Sea of Galilee and some of the prominent places, Bethsaida, and here's Capharnaum or Capernaum. Here's Chorazin. What else? Tiberias, Hippos, and Gergesa on the east side of the lake. The reason I want to show you this map is because the different color schemes that you see on the map reflect the different areas or regions that were often under the control of different people. The purple area here, south and west of, actually south, of Galilee is Samaria. That's where the Samaritans lived. The yellow part along the coastline is part of the major city of Tyre. This area in the yellow to the north is Galantia or something like that. It doesn't really matter what it's called. This was the area, I believe, that was ruled by Herod Philip. Then we have Galilee in the kind of red or, I don't know, peach-colored area. That was ruled by Herod Antipas. Judea in the south was ruled by Pontius Pilate, a Roman at the time of Yeshua. But I want to talk about this green area that is on the southeast shores of the Sea of Galilee. And it's kind of a large area. It's called the Decapolis, which is a Greek term that means 10 cities. And if you could see the whole green area, you could count the cities. And there are 10 of them, major cities, 10 major Greek cities. And this was an area that was kind of controlled. Well, it had been controlled by Gentiles for a long time, certainly since the days of the Greeks, and that continued into the era of the Romans as well. So these were Greek cities with Greek culture, Greek architecture, Greek culture and laws and practices and things like that. There were a lot of Jewish people who lived in this area because, after all, it was part of the Promised Land. But there was a great Gentile influence here. And I think in one of the recent videos that we've done here, we talked about the kind of animosity between Greek-speaking Jewish people and Hebrew-speaking Jewish people. The Hebrew-speaking Jewish people kind of looked down their nose at the Greek-speaking Jews as if they had kind of compromised their culture and their principles and values and things like that. So one of the events where Jesus is going to be confronting a demon-possessed fellow, or maybe a couple of them, is going to take place in the Decapolis. And one of the things that you'll notice in that story is there was a herd of pigs nearby. And of course, in Jewish territory, that would be unheard of because pigs were unclean animals. And of course, Jewish farmers would not normally, keep herds of pigs and so forth. So that kind of bears witness to the Gentile culture in this area. So with that, let's go ahead and turn to the texts that we'll be using today. And I'm using a Bible software program, a little bit different one. I think I used it in one of the earlier sessions when we were interested almost exclusively in pronunciation. What I'm using today is a program called Bible Works, and it is going to show each individual verse in parallel with the other languages that we might be interested in. So I've got us turning right now to the book of Acts, chapter 21, verse 40. And this is part of the story of Paul in his last trip, his final trip to Jerusalem, being arrested in the temple by the religious and civil authorities there, the Jewish authorities. And they were just about going to beat him to death, but he was rescued by the Romans, by some Roman soldiers who had come from the Antonia fortress, which was just to the north of the temple. And as the people were probably going to stone Paul to death for some transgression in the temple courts that they had accused him of, that's kind of beside the point. So the Romans rescued him from the hands of his own people, the Jews. And what happened was that as Paul was being kind of escorted back to the Antonia fortress, the Roman headquarters, he asked permission to speak to the people under the protection of the Romans there. So Acts 21 verse 40 says, so when he had given him, that would be the Roman officer who was in charge. So when the Roman officer in charge had given Paul permission to speak, Paul stood on the stairs and motioned with his hand to the people. And when there was a great silence, he spoke to them in the Hebrew language. What I want to do is go to our inspired Greek text. The word that is translated Hebrew is this word right here. It is pronounced in Greek, Hebraidi, Hebraidi. And it sounds like the word Hebrew. That is definitely what it means. If you look at the little definition box that's on our screen, it says the Hebrew language. But you would be surprised how many English Bible translations, even recent ones, even modern ones, have translated this word Hebraidi, not with the word Hebrew, but with the word Aramaic. Why would they do that? Because of this almost universal understanding before the time of the Dead Sea Scrolls that everybody spoke Aramaic. Now, you could say that these translations that do that, that use the word Aramaic, they've been written well within the last 75-year time frame. So they had, certainly they had knowledge of the Dead Sea Scrolls and the kind of proof positive that the scrolls offer that Hebrew was the spoken language of the time. But a lot of these traditions die hard. And, if some of these scholars who translated these English versions did not have the opportunity or did not do the homework that Douglas Hamp did, and some other scholars who have really kind of proven almost beyond the shadow of a doubt that the spoken language was Hebrew. So a lot of the translations that we use, they translate the word Hebraidi with the word Aramaic, just because they assume that Hebraidi, that Hebrew speakers in those days spoke Aramaic instead of Hebrew. Well, the ones that the versions that I use, the King James version, the New King James version, and some of the other ones, the Complete Jewish Bible is one that I like, uses the word Hebrew. But here are some of the English translations that translate Hebraidi as Aramaic. The New International Version was very popular years ago, has kind of been replaced in popularity by the English Standard Version, the ESV. And the ESV goes back to using the word Hebrew to translate that word, but the New International Version translated it as Aramaic. There's a version of the Bible that I like. It's a Messianic version called the Tree of Life version. And surprisingly to me, they also translate it with the word Aramaic. The TSV is another Messianic version of the Bible, and I can't remember what the TSV stands for, some kind of version. That also uses the term Aramaic. The New Living Translation, which is kind of a scholarly update of the Old Living Bible, the New Living Translation translates it as Aramaic. The NET, which is the New English Translation, a very scholarly and linguistic English translation of the Bible, and yet they make the mistake here of translating that word as Aramaic. And then the common, I believe it's the Common English Bible, the CEB, is a more liberal scholarly translation, and they translate it as Aramaic as well. So there are still a lot of people out there who are saying that Jesus spoke Aramaic. Before I retired, I happened to share in a pastor's conference that I was planning on teaching Hebrew language in my retirement. And they, a bunch of them said, "Oh no, you should do Aramaic instead, because we want to learn the language that Yeshua spoke, that Jesus spoke." But of course, they were all wrong about that. So anyway, I wanted to show you that example. And what I want to do now is go to the text that we will be reading today. And that is Matthew 8, verse 1. And let me get rid of this Greek because we won't need it today. Let me share with you what we'll be looking at. We'll be looking at Matthew 8, which is the first chapter that comes after the Sermon on the Mount. Sermon on the Mount is Matthew 5 through 7. So this is chapter 8 is what happened after the Sermon on the Mount. So our English version that we'll be looking at is the New King James Version. The Hebrew translation of the Greek New Testament. I need to emphasize this because even if the New Testament was originally written in the Hebrew language, as this scholarly a group from Hebrew University believes, and they have really offered, I think, infallible proof that that's the case. Even if it is the case, we do not have any existing documents, any manuscripts of the Hebrew New Testament. So any Hebrew New Testament that we look at is going to be a kind of a latter day, a modern era translation of the Greek New Testament into Hebrew. The one we'll be looking at today is actually one of my favorites. It's a translation by Franz Delitzsch. Delitzsch lived in the 50s to, he might have lived to the 1900s. But anyway, he was a great, although he was a Christian, he was a great Hebrew scholar and loved the Jewish people and desired greatly to evangelize them. And because he did that, there were many kind of his Christian colleagues who thought he had converted to Judaism. He swore he hadn't done that, but I think he could have done worse. Anyway, Delitzsch translation of the New Testament is a standard one. He uses vocabulary from the Old Testament rather than a Mishnaic Hebrew or a latter-day translation like we have been looking at. So today we'll be looking at the New Testament based on vocabulary from the Old Testament. And then this version that I want to look at is called the Peshitta, and it is an Aramaic translation of the Greek New Testament, or perhaps it was again, if the New Testament was originally written in Hebrew, it may be a direct translation from Hebrew into Aramaic. You can see that the letters are the same letters that we use in Hebrew. There are no vowel points on these words, although there are versions of the Peshitta that have the vowel points. I just don't happen to own any of those right now. So we're looking at a non-pointed text. The Peshitta is a very early translation, I think maybe 2nd or 3rd century AD or CE. But anyway, so we will, for a few verses, we will take a look at some of these Aramaic words. Hebrew and Aramaic are similar languages. They are of the same family of Semitic languages. So there are a lot of similarities. If you learn Hebrew pretty well, you can sometimes kind of figure out the Aramaic, although the Aramaic for Matthew 8:1 is kind of challenging. I'll do my best with it. So I at least wanted to expose you to the Aramaic language, but assure you that the Jewish people, the Bible people of the first century spoke Hebrew. So let's start with the English. When Yeshua had come down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him. So in Delitzsch's Hebrew New Testament, it's va and yered, he came down. Yerad means to come down, the Jordan River. The Yarden is based on this same 3-letter root. And of course, the Jordan River runs down from up around Mount Hermon into the Sea of Galilee and then continues further south to the Dead Sea, where it stops because it can't get out of there. Dead Sea is the lowest point on the face of the earth. So he came down, from Har. The Har is mountain. He came down from the mountain. Sermon on the Mount, that's where he'd been preaching. Va and Yelech, halak means to walk. So he walked or he traveled. Aharav. Actually, this I believe this is a plural. The segal makes it plural. So they walked after him, Aharav, after him. Hamon is a crowd, a crowd of people. Rav means great or numerous. So a great crowd followed him when he came down from the mountain. Let's tackle this with the Aramaic. A lot of these Aramaic words I don't know. I just have to kind of assume from the context and knowing the English and a little bit of the Hebrew. Kad, I think, means then. Nahat, I think is related to the Hebrew tahat. It means under or in a downward way. Da'an, again, I think that's a reference to a downward motion. Min is from, same as the Hebrew, min, from. Tawa, it might be Torah or Turah, which I assume is the Aramaic word for a mountain. Nikfahi, I suppose, was probably means followed him. Kanasha, I think that's like a version of Anashim, people. Sagi probably means like, I'm sorry, yeah, Sagi. Probably means like a large number of people. Okay, verse 2, Vahine, and behold, Ish, a man, Matzorah. Tzara is the Hebrew word for leprosy. A person who has it is a Matzorah. Ba, came. Va, and Yishtahulo, which means to bow low or to worship him. So a leper came to Yeshua, approached Yeshua and worshiped him. Va, and Yomar, and he said, Adoni. Adonai is the Hebrew word for my Lord. Adonai would be kind of our lords. It's kind of a plural version of that. Adonai is my Lord. So he refers to Jesus as my Lord. That is not saying the same thing as Yahweh, unless it's hard to tell in the example whether it should be Lord with all capitals or Lord with small letters. New King James writes it in small letters, so I assume this just means master or my leader, my boss, whatever. If tiratse, if you desire or if you are willing, tukal, you are able, la tahareni. Tahar means to be cleansed. Leprosy wasn't so much, lepers did not so much seek healing as they sought cleansing, because this disease made you unclean, therefore barred from the temple courts. You couldn't offer your sacrifices in the temple because you were unclean. So lepers had to go around, kind of dressing like a leper and calling out to warn people that they were lepers and those people should steer clear of them. So not only did they suffer with their disease, but they suffered as social outcasts as well. So not only a physically debilitating disease, but also just a morally and mentally, emotionally devastating disease. And it was thought to be incurable at the time. Vahu, and I think that's the same as hine. So behold, gala'av, I assume that is the Aramaic word for leper. Had, ahat, sagad, let's see. That might be worshipped him, la is him. Va'amar, and said, Mari, which is the Hebrew word way of, or the Aramaic way of saying Adonai. It means master, Mari. You may be familiar with the term from the New Testament, Maran Atah. Mari means master. So Maranatha means our master come. An tzava, Anna. And oh boy, I'm not sure what that is. Mashachach, Anat. I think you can, I'm just not sure of the Aramaic here. La Madakiha. I think this is probably a reference to like it's probably the Aramaic word for healing. It might have to do with cleanliness. I'm not going to spend too much time trying to translate these Aramaic words for you. I just want you to see them and maybe see some of the similarities. There'll be an awful lot of those Aramaic words that I don't know. So verse 3, Vayishalach, and he sent forth. Who sent forth? Yeshua. Yeshua sent forth. What did he send forth? Et, direct object indicator, yado. So Yeshua sent out his hand. He extended his hand. Vayiga'abo. Naga means to touch, and bo means like to touch him, to touch in him or touch upon him. This is a surprising thing for Yeshua to do, because clean people did not want to touch unclean people, lepers, because the disease was thought to be so contagious. So, people were afraid that if I, a clean person, touch a leper who's an unclean person, his uncleanliness might get on me and I might become a leper. I think Jesus looked at it differently. He was a clean person, and he believed if he touched an unclean person, the unclean person would become clean. So Jesus did not hesitate to touch lepers. And as far as I know, everyone that he touched or ministered to was cleansed, was healed. Vayomer, and he said, that's Yeshua said, Chafetz Anoki. Hafetz means I desire, or I am willing, or I will be pleased. Ani is the Hebrew word for I. Tahar. This is a command to be clean. So Jesus said, I am willing, be clean, command. So he asserts his authority and his power, and and barega, and in a moment, rega is like a very short time, like immediately. Near Rafa, Rafa, Resh, Pei, and Aleph is the three-letter Hebrew word for healing. Rapha. You may have heard the term Yahweh Rapha or Jehovah Rapha. Jehovah, of course, means nothing. It's a mistake in the pronunciation of God's sacred name. But one of the names of God is Yahweh Rapha, the Lord who heals us. This particular version of it is a nifal, so it's passive. So immediately the leper was cleansed. In other words, there was nothing the leper did to cause the cleansing. It was done to him. So he was the recipient of the action. And of course, this is the version that Isaiah uses. In Isaiah 53, I think it's verse 4 or 5, Nirafa lanu, by his stripes we are healed. Again, a nifal perfect, it's an accomplished fact. Tzara ato, of his tzara, of his leprosy. Pashat definitely means to put out your hand, like to stretch out. Ayad, I think that's a reference to the hand. Yeshua is Yeshua's name. Karav approached or drew near to him, Amar, and said, Tzav Anna. So this may be like willingness. Let's see, At Duka probably means like be healed or be cleansed. Uva, and came. Bashata, Sha'ah is probably in that hour, like immediately. At daki, cleansed, I suppose. Same root as here. Daka probably means cleansed. Galav, don't know that one. I think that's all the Aramaic will do, but again, you'll be able to see it on the screen for each verse. Verse 4, Va Yomer, and he said, somebody said, well, some masculine singular person said, Elav, to him, another masculine singular person, Yeshua. So Yeshua did the saying to the guy. He said, Ra'eh, which is like look or see. Al, like do not. Tisafer, sapar means to communicate a message. So do not report this, do not tell it, do not write it. La'ish, to a man. In other words, don't tell this to anyone. At this point in his ministry, Yeshua is kind of trying to hide, or not really hide, but he doesn't want his miracles to be so prominent because eventually that will spell his doom. The miracles is what kind of rallies his enemies against him. So he says, don't tell anyone. Valek, this is a commandment to halak, to go. Hare, ra'ah means to cause yourself to be seen. In other words, show yourself. El, to hakohen, to the priest that's on duty. So Yeshua is saying, go to Jerusalem, and whatever priest is on duty, show yourself to him, and he will check you out like according to the law of Moses, and see whether you're clean or not. So he will put your cleansing to the test. Vahit karava, let me say this again. Va, and hik rav ta. Karav means to draw near. In this case, it means to bring an offering to God. So draw near to the altar in the temple with your gift, with your offering to God. This would be a Thanksgiving offering. Et ha korban. You may have heard the word korban is just translated over into English from the Hebrew, and it means an offering, something you draw near to the altar, to God's altar, with a gift, usually an animal sacrifice. Asher, so the gift which tzivah commanded, he commanded, who commanded? Moshe, Moses, in the law of Moses in the Old Covenant. La'edut, adah is like a witness or a testimony. Lachem, to them. Who would the them be? The priests, who again thought that leprosy was incurable. But here's a guy who shows up claiming to be cured. And they would put it to the test, and they would make sure that he really was clean. And that being the case, he would offer the appropriate sacrifice. But the significant thing here is that these priests, who were pretty much theological skeptics and liberals, were going to see evidence of a miracle. Jesus didn't want them telling who did the miracle and like where he came from. So verse 5. Vayahi kavo, and it was as he came. El is to some place. Here's the place. Kafar Nahum, or Capernaum. Kafar is the Hebrew word for a village, and Nahum is the name of the Old Testament prophet Nahum. So Kafar Nahum was probably the hometown or the base of operations for the prophet Nahum from the Old Testament. Yigash, and let's see, approached him. Somebody approached him. A masculine singular person approached Elav, to him. Who was it? Who was this masculine singular person? It was a Sar Me'ah. Sar is the Hebrew word for an officer or a commander, and Me'ah is the Hebrew word for 100. So the commander of 100 troops. In Greek, they call that a centurion. In English, they call it a centurion too. So a commander of 100 troops came to Jesus. A commander of 100 troops is a Roman. So this is a Roman soldier. Ehad is a reference to this centurion. It was just one centurion came to Jesus. Va and Yitchanen lo. Yitchanen lo. We've got the yit prefix, which is a, what is that? A hit pael, I guess. Kind of a causal thing, but the Hanan root word here is the Hebrew word for grace, but it's also the Hebrew term that's used probably most frequently for the idea of getting something for nothing. So basically, what is this centurion doing? He's approaching Jesus with a request, which we'll find out what it is, what the request is in a few minutes. But he doesn't have anything to offer in exchange. So he's asking for Jesus to do him a solid, to do something for him for nothing. Lemor, so he's going to go on to explain his request in verse 6. This is a little tricky here because we have verse 6 in the English and in our Aramaic. But for some reason, Delitzsch also gives us verse 5, which we just read. So we'll pick it up at verse 6. Adoni, which is my Lord. And again, it's just a title of master or something because the English, or at least the English translators, thought it was just the Greek kurios, meaning master, and not Yahweh. Actually, it would be kind of surprising if a Roman soldier knew and used the name of Yahweh. So he's just saying, my master, my boss, kind of like he would say to his commanding officer. Hine, behold, Na'ari. Na'ar is a young person, probably one who is precious to the centurion. It could be his son, or it could be a young soldier under his command, or it could be a servant. Although Eved, the Hebrew word for a servant, is not here. Sometimes a master of a servant would be reluctant to call his slave a slave, so he would, call him my young man, or perhaps even my son if he was particularly dear to him. So my young man, Nafal. Nafal means to fall. Where did he fall? La mishkav. He fell to a mishkav, which is a bed. Shakav means to like to rest or relax, or a place where you sleep. To fall on a bed basically means, it doesn't mean to stumble and fall, but it means to lay upon the bed in such a way that you're so sick and so weak that you really can't get up very well. So somebody had fallen on the bed, this centurion's son or servant or something, baveti. This happened in my house, the centurion's house. Vehu, and he, nake. He has, naka means like to be struck. In the avarim, in his, probably his limbs, his members. So he apparently has become paralyzed. That's the English word that the New King James uses. And ma'una, I think means it's just like a short way. He has only a short way to go, ad, until, no, I take that back. I gave you the wrong word for this. I mixed it up with another word. And ma'una, ana is the Hebrew word for suffering, kind of like for anguish. So he's suffering ad until Meod is greatly. He's dreadfully tormented. That's a good translation. Vayomer, and he said to him, who said to him? Yeshua. Yeshua said, Elav, to him, to the centurion, Avo. Bo means to come or to go, I suppose. So Yeshua said, I will come or I will go. And Rafativ, I will heal him. The Vav ending is the suffix him. I will heal him. So great. But the centurion has something important to say. Va and Ya'an. Ya'an means to answer. So he answered. Who answered? Sar Hameah, the Sar, the officer of 100, the centurion. Va Yomar, and he said, Adoni, my master, Nakalti. Kal means to be small, and this may be like a nifal form. Basically, the centurion is saying, I am so small that I'm unworthy. May asher, from that, tavo, you would come or you would go, batzel, in the shadow. Tsal is the shadow. Kolati, I believe that's my roof, the roof of my house. Rak means only. Diberna, speak, please. Davar. Actually, this should be probably a noun. Nope, it should be a verb. Speak now. This is the noun, a word, davar, a word, same root as the a word for speaking. So say a word, va, and nirafa. This again is a nifal form of the word for healing. Will be healed, na'ari, my son or my servant. The centurion goes on to say, ki, because, anoki, that's how you say I or me. I am ish, a man, asher, which is tahat, under, or like submissive to authority. Mem shala, mashal is like leadership or authority. So I'm a man under authority. Vegam, and also yesh, there are, or yes, there are, tahat, underneath, yadi, under my hand, anashe is the, what do we call that? I want to say construct. Anyway, this form of anashim means men who are Saba, soldiers. Saba is like an army, so army men. Ve'amarti, and I say, lazeh, to this one, lek, which is a command form of halak, to go. What happens when I say that? Va halak, and he goes. Va lazeh, and to that one. Zeh is used in both cases, but this is kind of a this and that situation. Bo, I tell him to come. And what happens when I command him? Va, and he comes. Ula avadi, and to my servant. Eved is the Hebrew word for servant here. Asazot, do. This is a command. You should do this. Ve'asa, and he does it. Okay, verse 10. Vayishma, and he heard. Who heard? Yeshua heard. Vayit tama. Vayitama. Tama means to like be stunned or to be awestruck or to marvel. Vayomer, and he said, Yeshua said, El ha-holikim, to the, let's see, this is plural, it's an im ending, and halak means to walk. So he said to the ones walking, aharav, after him or following him, amen. It's the Hebrew word for amen, which means truly. Amer ani lachem. Truly I say, ani, I, lachem, to you. One thing you need to be aware of is when Jesus says, amen, I say, he says one amen. He's trying to get your attention. If he says amen twice, amen, amen, omer ani lachem, then you really better pay attention if he says amen twice. King James Version translates this with verily. New King James uses assuredly, which I don't like that much. I think other versions say like truly, truly I say to you, or something like that. We should just stick with amen. Everybody knows what amen means. Gam, also, or even, but Israel, in Israel, lo, I have not, matzati, I have not found. Emunah is the Hebrew word for faith, for faith. Amunah is the same three-letter root as the word for amen. So truth or faithfulness or fidelity. I have not found faith, rabbah, as great, kazot, as this. So the centurion won Jesus' approval. The ani, and I, omer, I say, lechem, to you all, rabim, many, yavou, will come, they will come, mimizrach. Mizrach is, it's the Hebrew word for the sunrise. So many will come from the east. Umima'arav, arav, Arav is the Hebrew word for evening. So that's the word for sunset. So the Hebrew word for east is sunrise, and the Hebrew word for west is sunset. Makes sense. It's an action-oriented language. And yasevu, they will sit. There are a couple of spellings of this word. You can spell it with a sheen here instead of the samek. So you can spell it a couple of different ways, but it means to sit or to dwell. Im, with Avraham, that's our friend Abraham. Vayitzach, and his son Isaac. Yaakov, and Abraham's grandson, Isaac's son, Yaakov, or Jacob. B'malkut, in the kingdom, Hashemayim, the kingdom of heaven. Kingdom of heaven is a reference to the millennial kingdom, which is still future to us. Although Jesus was offering it to people of the Second Temple era, he said it was at hand. If they had received him, they would have received the kingdom also. Now it's a future thing. The kingdom of God is the universal reign of God over all creation. Verse 12, aval, but B'nai Hamalkut, the B'nai, the sons of the kingdom. And this is a reference to like the religious people among the Jews who kind of assumed or had maybe a false confidence that they were destined to be in the kingdom of God, and or the kingdom of heaven, the millennial kingdom. And Yeshua is basically saying, not so fast. The people who occupy the kingdom of heaven are going to be people like this centurion. He's a Roman, but he's a believer. And he was finding so many of the Jewish people to lack faith. But the sons of the kingdom, Hema, they, Yigolashu, they will be dispossessed. They will be driven out or cast out, to Hachoshek, the darkness, Hachitzon. Chitzon means the outer darkness. Some people believe that that's a reference to hell, the outer darkness, where Sham, Yichye, there will be Chayalal is like weeping, mourning. Ve'haroch, like grinding hashinaim, your teeth. So weeping and gnashing or grinding of teeth. Again, some people think this outer darkness where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth is hell, which would imply that there are many sons of the kingdom who will lose their salvation and end up in hell for eternity. Others believe that this is a reference to a less privileged position in the kingdom of heaven. Because after all, he does say the sons of the kingdom, which is an implication that the people who are going to be in the outer darkness with weeping and gnashing of teeth are still going to be sons of the kingdom. But they would be people who have not done such a good job in living holy lives on a daily basis. So they will fall short of rewards and privileges in the kingdom. I kind of think it's the latter. I don't think this is a condemnation to hell for those people. But of course, what's their problem at this point in time? It's a lack of faith. So verse 13, Vayomer, and he said, Yeshua said, El, to Sar Hamea, to the centurion, Lek, go, Va, and Ka emunatecha, and as your faith, emunah, with a second person singular ending, so your faith, the centurion's faith, can, yes, yihye, it will be lecha. So basically, Jesus is saying whatever you believe is what you're going to experience. Va yerafe, and he was healed, na'aro, his servant or his young man, basha'ah, in an hour. Sha'ah is hour, hahi, in that very hour. The servant was healed. What produced that healing? The faith of the centurion. Vayavo, and he came, Yeshua came, Beita. Beit is a house. Sometimes when the hay is a suffix, it is what is called a locational suffix, like the place where he went was a house. The house of Petros. Petros is the Greek name of Peter. His Hebrew name was Shimon. Sometimes in Messianic Jewish versions or modern Hebrew translations, instead of Petros, which is Greek, it's translated Kepha, which is the Hebrew word for a rock. Petros means rock, and Kepha means rock. Delitzsch uses Petros. Let's see what the Aramaic. He uses a bit. Oh, he uses Shimon. The Aramaic uses Shimon, the Hebrew name. Vayira, and he saw at the direct object indicator, Hamoto. Hamoto is the mother-in-law, Peter's mother-in-law. Nofelet, nafal is to fall, la mishkav, upon her bed. So same deal as the na'ar, as the centurion's young man. She was in bed and couldn't get up. What was her problem? Va cholat, chala means to be weak or sick. Kadachat is the Hebrew word for fever. She had a fever. Verse 15, Vayaga, naga, the noon is weak and drops out, is replaced here by a yod. So he touched, Yeshua touched, Bayada, with his hand. He touched her. That's the hey ending is feminine for her. He touched her with his hand. Vatiref. This is an interesting word. Teref means to like tear apart. So the teref was torn apart, memena, from her. Kadahat, the katahat, the fever was torn from her by the power of Yeshua. I never noticed that before. That's a cool word. Tref that fever. Takam, and she rose up, va and tesha, sorry about that. Veta sharatem. Sharat means to serve. So she made them some dinner probably and kind of took care of their needs. And that was her way of saying thank you. Verse 16, Vayehi, and it was la'ate at that, it was at the time, erev, of evening, va, and yavi'u, many were caused to come, this is a hifil, elav, to him, to Jesus, rabim, many of them were caused to come to him. Ahuze, being overpowered by or controlled by. Ahaz means to be in the grasp of shadim. You may have heard demons referred to as shades. Shades is a direct transliteration from the Hebrew. So this is one of the Hebrew words for demons. I guess the word demon comes from the Greek daimonizomai, one who is demonized, shadim, the shades. So people possessed by or controlled by demons, va yagaresh, and he drove them, Yeshua drove them, et haruchot. Ruach is the Hebrew word for spirits, and it can be a good spirit like the Holy Spirit, or a holy angel, or it can also be a demon spirit or a fallen angel. So these are spiritual beings, and it says that Jesus drove these shades or these ruchot, these spirits, bidavar, by speaking to them, speaking authoritatively to them, p of his mouth, speaking with his mouth. V'yirafe, and he healed et direct object indicator, call all or every ha-holim. Holim means the weak or the sick. He healed all of them. Verse 17, Lamalot, he did this. He healed all those people, including Peter's mother-in-law. La malot, to fulfill. Et, direct object indicator, asher, that which, diber, he spoke. Who spoke? Yeshayahu is the Hebrew way of saying Isaiah, Yeshayahu, which means, let's see, Yesha, I guess this is salvation. Yahweh is salvation, Yesha. It's close to the name Yeshua. Hanavi, Isaiah was a Navi, a prophet. Remember, the Old Testament is divided up into three sections: the law, the prophets, and the holy writings. The Hebrew words for the law is, word for the law is Torah, starts with a T. The Hebrew word for prophets is Navi'im, starts with an N, and then the Ketuvim starts with a C or a K. It's a kaf, I believe, in Hebrew. So that's the K sound. So that's where we get the Tanakh, a reference to the Old Testament, an acronym for law, prophets, and writings. Lemor, the prophet said, Chalayenu, our weaknesses, our sicknesses. Who? He. Remember, who is he? He is she, and me is who. Nasa, he lifted up. He lifted up our sicknesses, or he took up our sicknesses. Machovenu, our pains, our sufferings. Sicknesses is like a disease, and machovenu is like a broken leg, injuries, and things like that, painful things. Savalam, saval is the Hebrew word for suffering, so he suffered under the burden of them, I'll say. Let's go on to verse 18. Vayahi, and it was kiraot, as he saw. Who saw? Yeshua saw. Hamon, a crowd a group of of people, Rav, a great crowd of people. Savivotav, like surrounding him. Savav means to surround. So they were surrounding him. Vayatsav, and he commanded, Yeshua commanded, la'avor, to cross over, avar. Incidentally, this, let's see, ein, bait or vait, and resh is the root word for the term Hebrew, yivrit, same root word, means to cross over. Misham, from there, from where they were. Where were they? Do you remember? Capernaum. El, they want to go to Aver, to the other side, to the crossover side of Hayam. Hayam is the Sea of Galilee. Remember, I showed you the map. So they're going to go from Capernaum in the north over, they're going to travel southeast to the Decapolis. So big crowds are forming. Jesus wants to get away. Vayigash, and approached him, Elav, to him, Ahad, one, Ha Sofrim. A sefer is a scribe, a person who reports things or records things or writes things. So one of the scribes approached him, Va Yomer, and he said, Elav, to him, to Jesus, Rabbi. Rabbi is the Hebrew word from where we get the word rabbi, which literally means my great one. Usually means like my teacher or my pastor, a person I look up to, a spiritual giant. Elecha, he says, this is halak, the hey, initial consonant is weak, so it drops out and is replaced, in this case, by an aleph, which is a first-person singular. So I will walk, acherecha, after you, el, to, call asher, like everywhere, which, telek. So everywhere you go, I will go. So yeah, this scribe wants to follow Jesus. Now, Jesus' response is going to be interesting, especially compared with another guy he's going to encounter right after this. So here's a guy who wants to follow him wherever he goes. And Yeshua says this, Vayomer, and I say, I'm sorry. And he said, Jesus said, Elav, to him, Yeshua is the subject, Le Sha'ul, I'm pronouncing this wrong, La Su'alim, a su'al, I thought it was shu'al. I think this may be wrong. I think this should be a sheen rather than a scene. Oh well, somebody will look that up for me. Anyway, this is the Hebrew word for fox. A shu'al is a fox. La shu'alim, to the foxes, yesh, there is a horim. And I think horim is like a cave or a, what would you call that? A den, a place where foxes stay. So foxes have homes. And la'of, and to the bird, hashamayim, of the sky or the heavens, kinim is the Hebrew word for a nest. Uben, and the son, ha'adam, of man, ein lo, there is not to him, makom, a place, lachaniach, to lay or rest. This is the root word of Noah's name. Remember, Noah's name means to rest. Et rosho, Son of Man has no place to rest his head. Interesting. Here's a guy who wants to follow him, and Jesus kind of discourages him. At least what he's doing is painting a realistic story of what it's going to cost him to follow Yeshua. He wants him, Jesus will be thrilled if people follow him, but he wants them to count the cost first and make sure that's what they want to do with their lives. So he's just being truthful with him. Verse 21, Va'ish, and a man, Acher, a different man, Another man, an additional man, min ha talmidim, from the talmidim. Yeshua had a large circle of disciples. Of course, he had the main 12. Within that group, there was the 4, and within that group, there was the 3, and then there was John, who was the disciple that Jesus loved. Beyond the 12 was the 70, then there was the 120. So in some degree of relationship, this guy is a Talmud, a student, a follower of Yeshua. Amar, this student said, Elav, to him, Adoni, my Lord, Chanicha, allow to me, or permit me, va'elech, and I will go, b'lishonah, I will go first. Reshit means the beginning, or the first thing, or something I must do before I follow after you. First, likabor, to bury, et avi, to bury my father. Some have said that this guy really didn't want to follow Jesus because his dad wasn't dead yet. He may have had 20 years left. And the guy says, look, I got a responsibility to bury my dad. When I've gotten that taken care of, I'll follow you, maybe 20 years from now. Well, there's no textual evidence for that. Let's say his father had just died. Yeshua's response, if that's the case, Yeshua's response is a little bit shocking, maybe a little bit cold and unfeeling. Vayomer, and he said, Elav, to him, Yeshua is the one who said to him, to this Talmud, lek aharai, follow, like walk after me, the hinach, and allow, lametim, to the dead, likvor, to bury, et metechem, their dead. So basically, Jesus is saying to this guy, sorry about your dad if he has just passed away, but it's a higher priority for you to follow me and let other family members or appropriate people take care of your dad's burial arrangements. This is a life and death thing. So Vayared, and so they went down El Ha'aniyah, into a boat. Now, in Hebrew, you can't tell how big this boat was. In the Greek, you can. The Greek word for a boat is a ploion. A ploion is a big boat, like maybe a 50 or an 80-foot boat. It's a big fishing boat, or a boat that can carry a lot of passengers. I think the King James calls big boats like this ships. But then if the word is ploiarion, it's kind of the diminutive form of that. It's like a rowboat. So a ploiarion is a boat that would be towed behind, like on a rope, a bigger boat, a ploion. So this is a big boat that Jesus and his disciples got into. Vayerodu ito, and went down with him, or boarded with him, Talmidav, his Talmidim. Let's go ahead to verse 24. Vehine, and behold, Sa'ar. I believe the word Sa'ar is like the word for a storm, like a windstorm, or maybe a rainstorm, something like that. A great tempest. Let's see what. This is an interesting situation because the Greek word here for tempest is a seismos, which doesn't have anything to do with weather. It's an earthquake. A Sa'ar is like the storm that's caused here was caused by an earthquake. So what happens? It just so happens the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea are on an earthquake fault, the Jordan River Valley earthquake fault. So earthquakes happen there all the time. If you're on a body of water and an earthquake happens underneath you, what happens on the surface? Tsunamis. So on a body of water the size of the Sea of Galilee, it would be a small tsunami, but a fearful and terrifying one. So a Sa'ar, like an earthquake, Gadol, a large storm, Chaya, was bayam. In the yam is like sea. This is more like a lake, but nonetheless, the same word is used there. Adasher, until which kisu, kisu means to cover. So something was covering the boat. It was hagalim. Galim is the Hebrew word for waves. So the waves were covering the boat at ha'aniyah. Vehu, and the boat was Yashan. I'm sorry, this is he was. Vahu Yashan. Yashan means to sleep. So Jesus was sleeping. Usually this is depicted in the movies as like all 12 disciples are crowded into a rowboat and they're rowing along there and the storm comes up and they're about to die. And it's pouring down rain and the waves are crashing over the boat and Jesus is there sleeping on the back seat of the boat. Well, Jesus is below decks. He is in a covered location, getting a little nap, getting some rest. So he's probably not feeling the same emotions that the disciples are feeling, as we will see. Vayagashu, and they approached him, Elav, to him, Talmidav, his disciples approached him. Vaya'iru, and they raised him up. It was like they jerked him up out of bed. Oto, him, Lemor, saying to him, Hoshianu, or Hoshienu. This root here is pretty close to Yeshua. You got to switch the yod and the vav around, but this is the Hebrew word for salvation. So they are saying, save us. Save us. Lord, save us. Adonenu, our Lord, save us. Avadnu. Avad means to be destroyed or to perish. We are perishing. Let's see, verse 26, Vayomer, and he said alehem to them, Katane. Katan means small. So he's going to talk about, again, I want to say this is construct, but I think it's the wrong word. It kind of modifies this word, emunah. So they've got little emunah, they've got little faith. You of little faith. Ma, why? Haredim. Harad is the same root word as King Herod's name. And basically it means to tremble and be upset and be fearful and stuff like that. So that's a good way to remember it. So why are you trembling? Why are you afraid? Atem, you all, you plural. Vayakam, and he got up. Vayagaar. Gaar is to rebuke or to reprimand. Baruchot. He reprimanded in the spirits or in the winds that were blowing. Uvayam. He also reprimanded in the seas. Vatahi, and there was dama. There was silence. There was calm, Rabbah, a great calm. So Jesus does a weather miracle here, or actually a post-earthquake miracle. Vayitamahu, and they were amazed, like the disciples were amazed. Ha'anashim, the men, the people. Vayomaru, and they said, me, like who is, Apho, this person who he, who is this, who is this, who can this be, Apho, who can this be, Asher, which, or who, Gam, also, Haruchot, also the winds, Vehayam, and the sea, Elav, to him, Yishma'un. Shema is the Hebrew word for hear. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. So hear, O Israel. But one interesting and important thing you need to know about this Hebrew word is that it also implies obedience. So like if you hear, it means you're going to do what you have heard. You're going to put it into practice. So there's a obedience aspect to this. So Jesus commands the winds and the sea and the waves, And they not only hear him, but they obey him. They do what he says to do. Verse 28, Vayehi, and it was, Kavo'o, as he came, El, to Aver, like to the other side, to the crossover side, Hayam, of the sea, El, to Eretz, to the land of Hagadarim, to the land of the Gadarenes, I guess, the people who lived there, the region where he went. Vayifgashu, oh, what's Pagash? Let's see. I guess met him. There approached him like to meet him. Shnei Anashim, two men. Ahuze, who were controlled by or overpowered by, controlled by Shadim. Remember what Shadim means? Shades are demons or spirit beings. Yotzaim, coming out, mibate, from the house of kavarot. Kavar is a tomb. So the house of tombs, what would the house of tombs be? A cemetery. Vahema, and they were ragazanim. Ragez, this root, resh, gimel, zain, means what? How do they have it here? Exceedingly fierce. Fierce is a good word. Intimidating. One of the names that apparently James and John, the followers of Yeshua, had was they're called in the Greek Boanerges, which is usually thought to be some attempt at transliterating a Greek term, which is probably B'nai Ragos. So sons of fierceness or sons of intimidation. So James and John were a couple of fierce guys, as was this guy or guys who came out of the cemetery there. And not only were they ragaz, but they were ragaz ma'od to a great degree. Ad, until asher, which lo yachol, they were so fierce that no one was able, yachol, able, ish, there was no man able, la'avor, to cross over, baderek, in the road, hahu. So there was a road through the cemetery, but these demon-possessed guys or guy would not allow people to pass by. So he was that intimidating. Let's see here, verse 29. Vahine, and behold, haim, they, tsoakim. Tsa'ach means to cry out. It's similar to yitzak, which means to laugh, but tsa'ach means to cry out like with a loud voice. Lemor, saying, Ma, what, lanu, to us, velacha, and to you, Yeshua. This phrase, ma lanu velacha, is very common in Hebrew. And basically it kind of means, what business is this of yours? Or like, what do you and I have in common? Like, what have you come for? What kind of dealings do you hope to have with me or with us? Lanu is us, and lacha is you. So Jesus, what business do you have? And they refer to him as Yeshua, Jesus, Ben, son of Ha-Elohim, son of God. So there weren't many people in those days who met Jesus who realized who he was, that he was the Son of God. But the demons knew. So this demon-possessed guy knows exactly who Jesus is. He's the Son of God. So they ask him, Habata, have you come? The hey here is it's like a question mark. The hey prefix, it's called a hey interrogative, I think. So it's a question. Have you come? Halom. Let's see, halom. Not sure what that means. La'anotenu. Ana means to torment or to make us suffer. Probably another hey interrogative and lom might be like, have you come to us or to make us to like to suffer? Below, in that it is not. Lo means not, in that it is not 8. It's not the time. So these demons probably figured eventually we're going to be sent to hell, but it shouldn't happen for a while. I mean, the great white throne judgment should be a long way off. So they're saying, have you come to torment us before the time, before the judgment day? Vasham, and there was set, or there were positioned. Adair is a like a flock, or it's also a word for a congregation. Chazirim is the Hebrew word for pigs. Rabim, many of them. There were many pigs in this herd. Roim, they were being pastured. Roim is the roe is a shepherd. So they were under the control of a shepherd or shepherds. Har hake, or hor hake, hor hake. Rahach means like a long way off. I'm not sure what the hey is there for. Maybe like the far distance, mayhem from them. Let's see. A good way off from them. Harahek. Okay. Pigs were a ways away. Vayit Hananu. So the demons were caused to seek Yeshua to grant them something for nothing. So they sought grace from him. They wanted him to do something for them for nothing. Elav, to him. Shadim, the Shadim asked Jesus for something. Lamor saying, if Tigar Shenu, Galash means to drive us out. So like Jesus, if you're going to drive us out, we suspect that's going to happen. Tana, give, Lanu, to us, like give us permission. Lavo, to come or to go. Ba'eder, to the flock. Chazarim, to the flock of pigs. Send us into the pigs. If we can't be in these guys, then send us into the pigs. Vayomer, and he said, Lehem, to them, Leku. It's a command or it's permission. Halak, go. Vayetzu, and they went out. Vayavou, and they came in. Ba'eder, into the flock. Ha-chazerim. They went into the, so they came out of the guys and went into the pigs. V'hinei, and behold. Chista'er. Chista'er. I thought I had that figured out before. I don't really know what this word means. Maybe Hine means suddenly. The whole herd. Chista'er. Maybe it means, no, the call would be every. I don't know what Histayer means here. Call Adair, call the whole flock, ha-chazirim, of the pigs, min ha-morad, from the, this would be like the top of the downward slope, or they started down the downward slope from the top, El Hayam, into the sea, Vayamutu, and they died. Mot is died, Bamayim, in the water, so they drowned. So the pigs didn't like the demons in them either. Vayanusu, and let's see, and they fled. Somebody fled, plural. Some guys fled. Who was it? Haroim, the shepherds. The pig shepherds ran away. Va, and Yavou, and they came, ha, the Ira, to the to that city, to like their city, or that particular city which was close by. Va Yagidu, Yagid, like God means to bear witness. They told et hakol, They told everyone, va'et asher, and also that which na'asa, which, and also that which was done, or what had happened, la achuze, to the ones under the power of Hashedim. So they told about the pigs, but they also told about the demon-possessed guys who were now set free. Vahine, and behold, Kol Ha'ir, and behold, the whole city, Yatza'ah, came out, Likra'at, to meet Yeshua, to meet Jesus. V'kira otam, and when he saw them, when they saw him, and as ra'otam, as they saw him, as they saw Yeshua, v'yivakashu, and they besought, or they requested mimenu, from him, la'avor, like to cross over again, like cross over the other way, Jesus. Avar means to cross over again. That's the three-letter root for the Hebrew language, and for any crossing over. Megavulam, gavul is like their boundaries or their borders. So leave the whole area. Like cross over probably means get back in your boat and go back where you came from. So that's the end of chapter 8. Kind of interesting story. Stories. A lot of miracles take place in chapter 8. Kind of interesting, like a little expedition into Gentile territory. And he sets some people free and provides some blessings there. But basically, the people chase him off. He has harmed them greatly in allowing or causing their flocks of pigs, which they shouldn't have had in the promised land anyway, cause those flocks to be destroyed. And so those people were deprived of income. So Jesus, please go away before we all go broke. So that's the end of chapter 8. Next time we read in the New Testament, it'll be Matthew 9. And for the next video, we will be back in Genesis once again. So let me give you the blessing this evening. We'll do the New Testament blessing, since we're in the New Testament tonight. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the communion of the Holy Spirit be with us all. In Hebrew, Chesed, Aronenu, Yeshua HaMashiach, Ve'achavat Elohim, Ha'ava, Ve'chaveret HaRuach HaKodesh, Im Kulenu Kol HaKadoshim, we're the saints. Amen. So hope to see you next time.